I'm here in Malaysia today with my friend Richard, and a driver in Malaysia for more than 15 years.
That's correct.
So today we're going to talk about his perception of EVs in this country and what it takes to grow adoption of electric vehicles here. Welcome back to Investing in Daren. Click subscribe to stay updated to more interviews like this. Richard, what should the audience know about you?
Well, basically, I've known Daren since 2004. We've been university mates. We've been gaming mates. We actually worked on a few projects in real life for a while. And now we are close friends. Just, I can't call him Malaysian anymore, but that's all good. If it works for him, it works.
So, Richard has no direct involvement with Tesla. He doesn't own any Tesla vehicle or the stock as well. He's not a Tesla fan like us in a sense. So for our viewers' context, Malaysia has about 10.5 million cars. And of these 10.5 million cars, EVs make up less than 500 vehicles, which is 0.005% of all vehicles in this country. So EVs, finding one here, it's almost like finding a unicorn.
It's not such a bad situation. I've actually seen a few Teslas on the street. So, yeah. But the majority of them, of course, are not. They are ICE vehicles.
That's true. Vast majority are ICE vehicles. There are up to 70 Teslas now in Malaysia. They come in through distributors and parallel imports. So I want to hear from you, Richard. What's your take and perception of EVs in this country?
Well, frankly, my perception of EVs is nuanced. I think from a personal point of view, from a driver's point of view, I think there's great potential for EVs in Malaysia. But the conditions must be right if we are to see a boom or a massive adoption rate. Of course, the government policy has changed and there's a clear direction for EVs now. Very welcome tax breaks, early adopter incentives. Those are welcome. That's from a driver's point of view. It's great to do your bit for the environment and to actually get a thrilling driving experience provided you get the right EV. If you look at things more deeply, it's pointless to have all these great incentives if we do not have the cars to purchase. And that is something I hope the situation will change somewhat quickly in Malaysia. Say if you want a Mercedes EQE, it's not available. If you want a Hyundai Kona, that's available if that's your cup of tea. If you want a Tesla, there is no official presence. So all things considered, you need the vehicles to come in first from the true official channel so you don't pay through the roof and then everything will be fine.
Big thing I'm hearing right now is that we don't have enough selection of EVs in the countries.
That's correct. We see BMW trying to bring in their iX.
Yep.
They are very active on social media. They are trying to draw attention, get early sign-up rates, very low booking fees, which is good. But we only see that they are the only luxury car maker who is making a push in this area. Mercedes has not started any sign-ups yet.
Yeah. So it's almost like chicken and egg. Like, do the car manufacturers bring in the EVs? Do people ask and buy it? So people not buying EVs because there isn't enough range or options available?
I believe that is the case because if people were looking for mid-range EVs, the Nissan Leaf would be selling like hotcakes right now.
Right.
Yeah. Or the Hyundai Kona.
Yes.
But they are not.
So there's a couple of those limited selections of EVs in Malaysia right now, like the Hyundai Kona, there's the Nissan Leaf, there's the Mini Cooper EV.
That's correct.
Then there's a Porsche Taycan, which is 1.5 million ringgit.
Yeah.
And a few more EVs. The range are expanding, but right now it's very limited.
That is correct.
How do you see that changing in 2022?
Well, I think it is the interest of the luxury car makers to actually make a push in a big way. That's why BMW is active now. But if we actually look at surveys and the studies done in overseas nations, we see that some of the luxury car makers, they stand to lose out most if they don't make the switch fast. Like BMW, I believe they are the most susceptible brand for conversion to Tesla, which would delight you. Tesla to the moon. It is in their best interest to change, and they've actually set pretty aggressive targets. Targets like they want to phase out all production of ICE vehicles by 2025. That applies to BMW and Mercedes. So from that perspective, they will launch more models. The question is, when will they arrive in the Malaysian market? So we'll be waiting for that. I will be waiting for that.
So you talked about the tax incentive earlier that's being passed by Malaysian government for this year's budget onwards for the next 2 years. Can you tell the audience a little bit more about what this tax incentives means for a car buyer in a practical sense?
It means a lot. If you buy an ICE vehicle right now in Malaysia, you pay anything from 60 to 105% more in terms of excise tax, excise duty. That's essentially buying something like 2 cars. Since the tax breaks have passed, then if you want to buy an EV, it'll make a lot more financial sense for you.
And what's the practical savings? You mentioned for ICE car, right now excise tax about 60 to 100%.
Yeah.
For EVs?
EVs, you don't pay any excise tax. There are no import duties, there are no excise duties. It's fantastic. There's no sales tax. There's nothing. Practically, what you buy is what you would get overseas. You don't even have to be in Langkawi to enjoy this.
And before this bill was passed, when you bought an EV, say in 2021, the tax would be
30%.
30%.
Which is still much lower than the ICE vehicles.
Yeah.
But due to a lot of other considerations, maybe due to the lack of options, there's no Tesla, there's no Mercedes EQE, there's no BMW iX, only now it's coming out.
Yes.
Due to all these factors, the lack of charging stations, limited battery mileage for models available here.
Yeah.
So many of these factors come into play, EVs were not flying, even with a lower excise duty rate. Yeah.
So now, for the next 2 years at least, buying an EV means you go from 30% excise tax to zero. You're paying no additional tax for the next 2 years. And you can buy parallel import distributed Tesla Model 3s in Malaysia. I'll put a link down in the description if you want to see some of the local distributors, as well as links to other EVs that you can consider from other brands. Still, an EV isn't for everyone in Malaysia yet. I believe that your next car will not be an EV yet, most likely.
Actually, it will be an EV.
So tell us more about that decision.
Well, it's purely from a financial perspective, it makes more sense. EVs have progressed tremendously. As I said earlier, the battery life is good, much better. The range is good. So, it would be great if I could get an EV with about 500 km mileage. And I think that would fix a lot of problems.
You mentioned earlier that one of our challenges here is the lack of EV chargers. How does that weigh into your decision to buy an EV in Malaysia?
If these incentives were passed 2-3 years ago, I would probably not get an EV immediately. I would wait it out. And I think the waiting time has passed. More and more charging stations are installed. If you go along the North-South Highway, you will find more and more charging stations. Is the number ideal to support a 20% conversion of all drivers in Malaysia? No, it's not. But more will be installed. And I think with these incentives, it will spur EV adoption. And once that happens, it is also in the interest of car companies, automakers, to help facilitate this transition. Yeah.
What can be done? So the government has done I think a big part just reducing the taxes, a big signal for EVs. What else can public or private sector do to encourage more adoption of EVs here?
The automakers like BMW, Mercedes, and maybe one day Tesla, they should actually set up an official EV presence here, beef up their service center network. Of course, people will say, what's there to service in an EV? Well, quite a lot actually, in terms of software. I know they don't have engines, so there's a lot less servicing from that perspective. But the point is, you still have brake pads to change, you still have suspension issues. So if they can, and software updates are actually very, very important. So if all these automakers can actually look into beefing up their service network in terms of EVs, I think it'd be good for them and for the consumer as well. Yeah.
So I agree that there's a lot less to service in EVs. It will still be a need. So while the brake pads wear a lot less because of regenerative braking in EVs, one thing that we do change probably a bit more frequently could be the tires, because the instant torque, instant acceleration, it's not best friends with some tires.
Yeah. The heavier your right foot is, be prepared for more and more tire burn.
Anything else that can be done?
Charging networks, it's also in the automaker's best interest to invest. If we look at Singapore, I believe you have shown some videos on this. They installed a Tesla supercharger network, shopping malls, public spaces. I know Tesla is not in Malaysia yet, but if BMW and Mercedes could beat them to that game, they could actually drive a lot more interest in the capability of their cars and also drive their brand presence. So if they invest in a charging network, not just in malls, but along the North-South Highway, it will be extremely good for them.
Your own choice to consider getting an EV as your next car is not common in Malaysia. It's a rarity, right?
For now, maybe, but actually a lot of my friends are actually seriously considering EVs. Not just talking about the really rich ones who obviously are looking at things like the Taycan, but the middle class folks are also looking at EV options. They just want them to arrive.
Okay. Why are they considering EVs now? What's changed?
Of course, the tax breaks are extremely important as a swing factor.
Yeah.
And I think there is a realization now that if you are always going to rely on gas, it's not going to work out very well for everyone. There were the recent floods, and some of my neighbors and friends were affected by them. And all of us understand that climate change is not something to be trifled with. You know, it used to be a laughing matter for some people until their homes were affected. And for me, my home was safe, but I could just look out across the dividing wall of my residential area, and I could see that that street was basically turned into a flood relief evac center. And that was not fun. You could see helicopters flying overhead, you could see boats being launched, and people being displaced, and there was a lot of suffering, really. And every little bit helps. If we can reduce carbon emissions, and if we are in a financial state to assist in that effort, I think every little bit helps.
Malaysia is an oil exporter, so is Norway. Yet Norway today has 95% of its new car sales as EVs. What do you see as different between Norway and Malaysia?
Well, apart from the fact that they have better weather, actually I think the environmental consciousness in Norway is a lot higher. If we look at the oil export similarities, Norway was actually a very poor nation until they discovered oil. And they became an oil producer, I think, in the 1970s or 1969. That's when they struck gold. But prior to that, because of their economic status, cars were always expensive. And they have something called vehicle tax. And that is extremely high for European standards. So, I mean, cars are not cheap in Malaysia either, as we've covered earlier. But if we look at Norway, very strangely for an oil producer, I think more than 90% of their energy comes from renewable sources, largely from hydropower.
Yes.
So they've invested a lot in dams. The vehicle tax has always remained. So, and they also have some social factors that help them along the way. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with the band AHA.
Yes.
Their lead singer, he's an environmental activist. He drove around Norway in a modified Fiat Panda, which looks nothing like a Panda. It looks more like our Myvi. He drove around Norway with that. He picked up all the traffic fines, and he just didn't care as a sign of protest. And when I say modified, he actually put electric components and into that car to run on electricity. And this was way before EVs were even a novelty or even an in thing. So before long, his actions rubbed off on society, and the concept of an EV just picked off in Norway. Long before EVs were actually an in thing, long before automakers came out with their EVs, long before Tesla came around. So no matter who took over the government in Norway, more and more incentives were provided for EVs. And if we look at some of those incentives, you're talking about you can drive on bus lanes. You can park for free at municipal car facilities. You can drive toll-free. You don't pay toll. So all these things are being provided by Norway. The most important thing to consider is that the price of gas in Norway is 4 times higher than that of Malaysia. We pay $2, 2 ringgit 5 cents. They pay around slightly over 8 ringgit. So that's quite crazy. And the scarcity of petrol stations over there compared to KL or any town and city in Malaysia where you have plenty of petrol stations. True. Makes it a lot harder for them to gives drivers in Norway a lot more to think about. Whereas for us, it's like second nature. Gas is cheap, it is subsidized, let's go top up. So buy all the gas guzzlers, it doesn't really make a difference. If you have money, just go for it. So that's one of the primary differences that I think we need to look at before we just make a conclusion that because of the taxes, tax breaks, EV adoption will take off here. Because in Norway, it is a long process. That process started in the 1990s all the way till now. And if we look at EVs in EV adoption rates in Norway, I believe they did not take up until around 2009, 2010.
Yeah, so you'll see that from 2011 it's about maybe 5-8% adoption, and then it rose very quickly in the past decade up to 2021 right now where it's 95%. So the past 10 years has been the most significant acceleration.
Yes.
There was news that Tesla is now by far the most popular vehicle brand of all types in Norway, And most of the other top-selling brands are also heavy in EVs in the country also. And most of the EV options that we mentioned that are coming out are still in a price range of at least 200,000 ringgit and above.
Yep.
The mainstream cars, the most popular cars in Malaysia, if you look at top rankings or Wikipedia, they're the Proda Myvis, they're Protons,
That's correct.
which are an average price of about 50,000-60,000 ringgit.
Yes, nothing above 100k. Yep.
So, for mainstream audiences, and we talk about mainstream adoption, and people may feel that EVs are really for the rich.
I disagree with that. Would you consider someone who buys a Toyota Camry to be rich? That's a D segment car that retails for around 180, 190,000. I'm not sure the exact price, but around that range. So if someone is willing to spend that much on a D segment car, guzzles gas, why would they not top up a little bit and buy a Tesla Model 3? This is not endorsement, but just saying, if the Tesla Model 3 is priced at 220 to 235,000, it's not that big a top up. You will save in the long run in terms of fuel. You'll get a better, more thrilling driving experience. Why not consider that?
So it sounds like despite subsidized fuel costs, the economics of EVs are getting there. There are more plans for public EV chargers. The government tax incentives will help. Now let's shift towards the mindset of EVs. You've got a chance to work with students of all types, MBA students and also undergrad, postgrad as well. How are their perceptions on EVs? Because these are the future generation of drivers too.
Quite frankly, I'm quite surprised by their mindset and their attitude towards switching. We actually did a survey for an MBA project recently, involved around 470 respondents. Almost 70% of them said that they would consider switching in the next 1 or 2 years.
To an EV?
Yes, to an EV. This was done shortly after the 2022 budget was announced, and the media, of course, highlighted the EV tax incentives and early adopter incentives. So I suppose that influenced some of the respondents.
Many people also wonder that, like, why don't I just get a hybrid, like the convenience of gas, but then I'm still doing my small part for the environment?
Oh yes, but that wouldn't qualify you for the early adopter incentives the government is giving, because that only applies to BEVs, 100% EVs.
I see.
Hybrids, plug-in hybrids, they don't qualify for these tax breaks.
Okay.
Yeah. And anyway, there was a question in the survey asking respondents whether they would consider a hybrid. And a lot of them said no. I suppose this was because the Malaysian government did give a hybrid incentive last time, I think for 2 years, and the take-up rate was not so great.
I see.
And perhaps the timing wasn't right. I know for a fact my neighbor hated his hybrid car. The battery died really, really fast. So I think, there were some teething problems that maybe automakers did not iron out before prior to committing to it.
And now with this shift to EVs, so you mentioned your next car is going to be an EV.
Yes.
Can you tell us more about what EV you're planning to get and what made you make that decision?
This is a very, very tricky question that you are posing, purely because Mercedes has talked about plans to bring in a range of EV options.
Yes.
I will probably be leaning more towards an EQE 400, yes. Yeah.
Tell us a bit more about this car.
It has more screens than the Tesla if you are willing to pay a little bit more.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you cannot play video games on those screens. But of course, as a responsible and socially conscientious driver, I will be focusing purely on driving. So the inability to play Witcher 3 will not be a deciding factor for me. Maybe it would be for you, but yeah.
It's okay. Sony is launching a new mobility division with their own cars. So one day you can have a PlayStation controller in it. Maybe.
Time will tell.
So this Mercedes EQE is probably, for what I understand, light reading, is equivalent of a Tesla Model S. It's a premium sedan basically.
It's not so much 100% Model S. That would be the EQS.
I see.
EQE would be more like your variant of the E-Class right now.
And that's one level up?
One level above the C-Class.
Okay.
Yeah, so Mercedes right now, they have an EQC, the EQE, and the EQS. EQS being, their top of the line. EQE would be the in-betweener. Yeah.
So a lot of people appreciate Tesla for the software. What could people appreciate about a Mercedes EV?
Their interior is definitely a lot more opulent than the Tesla. Their build quality would, maybe some people will disagree heavily and snipe me for this, but their build quality is definitely ahead of Tesla right now. But of course, the gap will narrow, and I believe the gap has narrowed. If we look at the first Teslas coming out of Giga Shanghai and the amount of criticism they generated, then I believe QC is better now. But is it the same level as BMW or Mercedes? Not quite. I don't think so. But of course, Tesla is manufacturing 1 million vehicles a year now.
So close to it. Yeah, they closed 2021 about 930 plus thousand.
Yeah.
Almost a million.
So the longer they continue this cycle, the QC will definitely go up.
And it's not just the build quality, right? The way that both cars handle will be very different. Can you tell us more?
I'm not sure how different they will be right now because I'm not driven the EQE.
Okay.
But driving my friends 5 Series, 3 Series for BMW as well as the C Class for Mercedes. Of course, I shouldn't say this, it feels like adultery, but of course the BMW, the way it handles the corners, it's a driver's car.
Yeah.
It's a very nice and experience. But if you're a passenger, then you sit in the Mercedes, and that's different. It's really, really good. Yeah. So for Tesla, from the videos that you posted and from what I've seen and read, of course the straight line speed is undeniably better than what the 3 Series or C Class can provide.
And it isn't a competition between EVs. I mean, every extra EV that replaces an ICE on the road is a win for the world and the environment. So whether it's a Mercedes or Tesla, it's a net win as long as it's coming from an ICE car.
Yeah. I think there's also some sentimental element involved in the choice, or the preference, I should say. I'm not chosen yet because there's nothing to choose until it gets here, right? You can't buy something that's not sold. So there's a sentimental aspect to it. Always like Mercedes. Yeah. So we'll see how things go. Of course, things could change if Tesla actually starts a local sales operation in Malaysia and official brand presence. I don't have to go see some third-party supplier and pay a marked up fee for it. If Tesla has an official presence in Malaysia, why not? Just go and test drive. There's nothing to lose. And at the end of the day, just get the car that works better for you.
Right. So right now, Tesla is officially in Singapore. They finally entered. It was quite a dramatic story in Singapore, as we know that they were in Singapore a decade ago. And
they exited.
They exited in 2011. They came back almost a decade later. So even in Singapore, it was such a tough journey. So when they think of their next Southeast Asia country, to me it's a toss-up between Thailand and Malaysia. Thailand's the biggest automotive market in Southeast Asia. They got huge automotive talent because of the manufacturing. That's why there's a lot of Japanese manufacturing there. Huge truck market as well. And average vehicle selling prices are higher. But then Malaysia is next to Singapore, which makes expansion geographically easier.
Correct.
And there are a lot of merits for Malaysia too. So sounds like a toss-up to me, but how would you think about Tesla coming to either Thailand or Malaysia next?
I think as long as they end up in ASEAN and assemble their cars locally in ASEAN, I mean, I'm not talking about a gigafactory in ASEAN, but in the ASEAN region, but if they were to invest in one, fantastic. If not, just assemble locally. I think Thailand or Malaysia will still benefit the drivers here, assuming that a lot of them would want to switch to Tesla. Yeah. But of course, being Malaysian, I would prefer them to start something in Malaysia, assemble at least in Malaysia. And that, I guess, since Thailand already has so much going for them from an EV perspective, Tesla would perhaps gain less of a preferential treatment if they were to set up a base of operations in Thailand compared to KL, which until recently, until this budget 2022 was passed, had no clear government policy on EVs. I mean, there is a statement of intent, but there were no targets, there were no incentives, so you don't expect conversion to take place. But now, there are a lot of incentives. The question is, how long will they last? And if you look at Norway, the government gives incentives for so many decades. Will Malaysia be willing to give the same? Because we discussed earlier about excise taxes, excise duties that drivers must pay to buy an ICE vehicle. From a fiscal standpoint, the government may lose that revenue. That is a fact, and we cannot deny that fact. If they would not really be willing to forego that much of the revenue that they gain, if something does not replace it.
Agree.
And if they can't adequately replace that, and people switch to EVs and they keep the incentives going for 10 years, what's going to happen? So of course that question is above our pay grade.
Yes.
But I believe the government will also consider that. I'm not sure whether we would be the Malaysian government would be willing to keep this incentive going for 1 or 2 decades.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it may not also be just so much on incentives itself. Like saying Elon Musk himself said he's fine if there are no EV incentives as long as it's a level playing field. So at minimum, do not subsidize petrol, which is going to be a hard thing in this country.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, because at the level playing field, in many countries, EVs stand by themselves already. Like they do not need a subsidy to make sense.
Yep.
Yeah. And in some countries, whether you're in Norway or UK, you don't really have a choice. It's going to be EV. There are no ICE cars in the future
100%.
to buy as they phase them out. So how do you see EV adoption playing out in Malaysia? Like, would it start with the premium segment first?
Normally, it does start with that. If we look at the hybrid incentives the government provided many years ago, immediately you could see a lot more Audi A6 hybrids on the road. You could see a Porsche hybrid as well. So basically, all the rich folks were getting involved, and those who were not so affluent, they would opt for the Toyota Prius or the Prius C. So basically, hybrid cars were not really the finished article then.
Yeah.
And I think the moment the incentives were withdrawn,
Yes.
sales tanked. So I'm sure EVs would definitely not lose momentum that way, because if you look at the automakers themselves, they are giving themselves time limits. They are phasing out their ICE production. BMW, Mercedes, no more new ICE models after 2025. And I believe other more luxury automakers, they are also setting time limits for themselves. So from this perspective, will EVs, the sale of EVs tank in Malaysia? No, I don't think so. The question is really getting the ball rolling. And so automakers, please do your part, bring in the models.
Many automakers, even those who are very resistant to changing into EVs, like Toyota, they're finally investing a lot more into EVs. Toyota would have their first dedicated BEV middle of next year. It's going to be their SUV. So you'll see it in Singapore and other countries in about 6 months. Next year is now, actually. It's 2022. Can't believe it's 2022 already. So the EV adoption is going to play out in premium segments first, and probably where we'll start see that manifest is like you'll see more EV chargers in like those premium shopping malls, premium hotels. Like
it could actually take place simultaneously, because there's the ride hailers.
Yes.
What's going to stop someone like Grab from buying a fleet of EVs for their drivers?
The charging infrastructure.
Yeah, of course. But then they would have their hub of operations. They could take care of that. So if someone like Grab were to say, let's make an EV push in Malaysia, let's go green.
Yes.
I don't think they would be buying the BMW iX. I don't think they would be buying the Mercedes EQC or EQE.
Correct.
I mean, they are not even available, but they would be buying Hyundai Konas.
Yeah.
They would be buying Nissan Leafs.
Yeah.
If ride hailers would jump on the bandwagon, then there could be a simultaneous push, both in the standard line as well as the luxury segment.
You bring up a big point. Like if public transportation or ride hailing could pave the way, it could really help public transportation. So example, a couple of years ago, Shenzhen, the city of Shenzhen in China, moved entirely to EV buses. There's 17,000 EV buses and 22,000 EV taxis. So basically, like the entire fleet in the city of Shenzhen is EV.
Yes.
How practical is that happening in Malaysia? Or at least starting, let's say, in KL or Penang, or it's a small area first?
I think the issue of practicality really depends on the companies themselves as to whether they will be willing to come up with this investment. I believe Grab has already committed a substantial amount, maybe not in Malaysia, elsewhere. They have done so. Uber has done so. And the time is right if they are willing to do so in Malaysia, because, hey, there are incentives now. You don't pay any more for an EV. So if you want to go green, do it here. The time is right. So there is no push factor to hinder them.
You talk about Uber. Uber has Teslas now in the US, and one of their selling points to the Uber drivers is if you drive a Tesla, you earn more per day because people are willing to pay more for a Tesla.
Yes.
And Grab also has one of these booking options where it's like the green Grab, or like the cleaner version of Grab.
Yes.
Some people are willing to pay a little bit more.
I'm not one of those people, but I'm willing to buy my own EV. So, but I do understand your point.
Yeah. Or even like car rental at Hertz, now that they got on the Model 3s,
Yes.
they reported that the rental rates, they earn about $100 a day on a Tesla compared to maybe about $60, $70 a day on a non-Tesla. So
It makes sense for both for all of them from a financial perspective as well. If they can if consumers are willing to pay that much extra, why not?
So thanks for the look on just sharing about the EV landscape in Malaysia, your perception of it as a driver.
Yeah.
I look forward to riding on your Mercedes EQE.
You must not comment on the number of screens. You must not comment on the inability to play a game or the lack of Easter eggs. I know from a Tesla perspective what you are looking for, and unfortunately I don't believe you will find them in the Mercedes. But appreciate the aesthetics, appreciate the ride comfort, especially appreciate the build quality.
Storied brands, legacy brands like Mercedes have a long tradition of making great cars. So I think I look forward to just experiencing other EVs too. I think every company has their own strengths and weaknesses. Well, Tesla is doing very well and doing a lot of the right things. I think other companies are doing their best as well. Again, Tesla's vision is to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy, not just Tesla's transition. So I think that's a win for everyone.
Agree.
So last fun question. Currently, there are less than 500 EVs on Malaysia's roads. What's your guess for how many EVs will there be at the end of 2022?
Whoa. No comment. I can't say. But can't really say. Because there are not enough options. So I really can't base an estimation, make an estimation of any strong base right now.
Do you think it could at least 10x from that low base to 5,000?
No.
Wow, not even 5,000.
No. We are in January. How many EV options are there?
8, 10?
Yeah. And those are the ones that are not selling.
So, viewers, do you think Malaysia could hit 5,000 EVs by the end of 2022? Again, for context, there are 10.5 million cars here. I'll be cautiously optimistic and say I think we can cross 5,000 EVs in Malaysia.
I say we will hit the target if the ride hailers and the public transport services play ball.
I'll say that the prime audience this year and next year for EVs in Malaysia would be those who live in landed property, those who are driving luxury or premium cars like Porsches or Ferraris, or even BMWs and Audis and Mercedes. So if just 1% of that target audience converts, there'll be 5,000 EVs. Doesn't need to be the Tesla. They can buy a EQE, EQS.
Of course.
Yeah.
But I don't think I think you need the right healers to support the effort. Yep.
I think that will help. Hopefully it happens within a year, but it may take some time because it's not there yet, even in Singapore fully.
I think by 2023, the tax breaks still apply then. It will hit that magic number you just said. But maybe this year may be tough. It really depends on how fast the automakers can bring in their EV options. If they take their time, bring them in June, July, then it's hard to see that number being hit.
So stay tuned because I'll be back in Malaysia for a year from now. We are going to watch Avatar 2 live. We've got a special reason for doing it.
Yes.
We'll tell you why next time.
Yes.
Last time we watched Avatar was about 13 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still remember in a cinema in Malaysia. It's quite a story. So if you found this video interesting, insightful, please click the like button. If you want to see more interviews like this, hit subscribe. Thank you for watching. Take care and see you in the next one. Bye-bye.